Kathleen Kennedy's response to Critical Drinker's viral criticism of Star Wars wasn't just bold, it backfired in an unexpected way. Before we get started, if you're new to the channel and enjoying the content, make sure to subscribe and hit that bell icon so you never miss an update. She attributed the backlash to misogyny, but the subsequent fallout proved it wasn't that simple. From Lucasfilm's controversial firing of Gina Carano to shocking revelations about pay disparities on the Acolyte set, Kennedy's attempt to defend the franchise only worsened the situation. Fans, critics, and even cast members are now speaking out. So how did her response spiral into such a dramatic downfall? Let's dive into why this misstep is making headlines. About a month ago, Kathleen Kennedy made a bold move by publicly addressing the growing online backlash surrounding Star Wars, particularly after the release of The Acolyte. Two of the most prominent critics leading the charge were the Critical Drinker and Star Wars Theory, whose videos collectively gained millions of views. Their criticism, along with others, fueled a wave of fan frustration. In response, Kathleen Kennedy, alongside several Star Wars cast and crew members, attributed the backlash to misogyny, suggesting that the female characters were being unfairly targeted by the male-dominated fanbase. While it's likely true that some of the actors received personal attacks via social media, the majority of fans seem more focused on criticizing the show itself, particularly its weak storytelling. Reviews and videos about The Acolyte racked up millions of views, and most of them centered on the show's narrative flaws rather than its inclusion of women or diverse characters. Yet Kennedy's response didn't seem to acknowledge that distinction, and in the last few days it has dramatically backfired. Now here's where things start to get interesting. In her statement, Kathleen Kennedy implied that male fans were resistant to change, especially when it came to seeing more women on screen. However, this claim begins to unravel when you look at the actions of Lucasfilm and Disney. Just recently, they fired Gina Carano, one of the stars of The Mandalorian, simply for expressing an opinion that didn't align with the company's stance, and if that wasn't enough, Disney and Lucasfilm have been trying to block Gina's right to sue for wrongful termination. They've already failed in court once, and when they tried again just a few days ago, it backfired once more. This whole situation exposes a double standard. On one hand, Kennedy is saying that the fans need to be more open-minded about different perspectives, but on the other hand, Lucasfilm clearly wasn't open to hearing out Gina Carano's differing views. Her opinions weren't illegal or offensive, they simply didn't fit the company's narrative, so they cut her loose and now are fighting her legal battle to get her compensation. Personally, I believe that diversity is incredibly important. Our media should reflect the world we live in, not just in terms of race and gender, but also in the diversity of opinions. That's exactly what my channel stands for, embracing all viewpoints without dismissing one as more valid than another. We all have a right to express ourselves, and that includes differing opinions. If Kathleen Kennedy and Lucasfilm want to accuse fans of not accepting diversity, then they should be leading by example, showing that they're open to different perspectives, even from their own cast members. When they fired Gina Carano over her views, which technically they had the right to do, whether it was morally right or wrong is a different debate. But if you're going to let her go for expressing her opinions, you can't turn around and get upset when she chooses to fight back legally. You can't then try to have her lawsuit dismissed just because her stance doesn't align with yours. If you're claiming to stand for acceptance and open-mindedness, you need to demonstrate that by allowing her to speak her mind. But the backlash to Kathleen Kennedy's statement doesn't stop there. It was recently revealed that female cast members working on The Acolyte were being paid significantly less than their male counterparts, up to 20% less. That's a huge disparity, especially considering Kennedy's public stance against sexism and bigotry within the fanbase. It's the very definition of hypocrisy to point fingers at fans while the show she oversees isn't even paying women equally for the same work. This kind of wage gap is simply unacceptable, especially from a company that claims to champion equality. In just a few short weeks, we've now seen two glaring examples of Lucasfilm not practicing what they preach, whether it's about respecting different opinions, as in the case with Gina Carano, or ensuring fair treatment and pay for women. Now, while these examples reflect the broader actions of the studio and not necessarily Kathleen Kennedy herself, it's important to remember that Lucasfilm is her studio. She's the president, which means she's ultimately responsible for everything that happens there. Any decision made by Lucasfilm, whether it's paying female staff unfairly or mishandling backlash, gets her final approval. So when the studio fails to pay its female employees equally, that responsibility falls squarely on Kathleen Kennedy's shoulders. And if you think that's where the problems end, you'd be wrong. Just a few days ago, a cast member from The Acolyte came forward to speak out against Disney's handling of the backlash. This wasn't just about creative differences anymore, this was personal. The actor pointed fingers at Disney as a whole, which of course means those in charge: Bob Iger, who leads Disney, and Kathleen Kennedy, who oversees Lucasfilm and therefore the Acolyte. So after all the public statements about supporting women in the industry, it seems Kennedy didn't actually provide any real help when it came to her cast being personally attacked online. Now, don't get me wrong, I think any criticism of the Acolyte's storytelling is fair game. The show, quite frankly, wasn't good and fans have every right to criticize it. But when a small portion of fans cross the line and start sending hateful messages directly to the actors, that's when it becomes personal. And at that point, it's the studio's responsibility, Kathleen Kennedy's responsibility, to make sure those actors are okay and being supported. It's one thing for the fan base to attack a poorly written story, but it's another thing entirely to harass individuals who are just doing their job. Fans like yourselves or those of bigger channels are totally within your rights to criticize the Acolyte's flaws. But we should always remember that the criticisms are about the story and the direction of the franchise, not the people behind it. And I think Star Wars Theory really hit the nail on the head when he said this. So with the cast and crew of the Acolyte being personally targeted on social media, it's clear they should have received some form of support, especially when the whole message of the show and the studio was supposedly about empowering and supporting women. But it seems Lucasfilm didn't even follow through with that. It's honestly wild to see that after Lucasfilm publicly criticized the Star Wars fanbase, we're now seeing reports that reveal the studio itself may not be free from internal issues of bias and bigotry. For months, the Star Wars fanbase was vilified, labeled as toxic, and painted as nothing but a group of hateful critics. But now we're finally starting to see the real complexity of the situation. It's not just a matter of toxic fans attacking a flawless studio, because clearly Lucasfilm has its own problems to deal with too. At the end of the day, all any of us really want is good entertainment. We want a space where everyone is respected regardless of their opinion, race, or gender, and where the focus is on telling great stories that unite us, not divide us. So let's work towards building an entertainment industry that brings us all together, where we can get back to enjoying awesome movies and shows without all the drama. But what do you think about this situation? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and if you enjoyed this video, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe to Movie Saga, and I'll catch you in the next one.